Coming to you on Secular Media Network, this is the Gaytheist Manifesto. Hello and welcome to the Gaytheist Manifesto, your source for news, commentary, discussion, and debate at the intersection of the atheist movement and the LGBT rights movement. I'm your host, Callie Wright, and I am joined today by my co-host, Daniel Wolfsong.
Hello, lovelies.
Today's episode is called Behind Enemy Lines. We're bringing you stories of LGBT folks and non-believers who are forced by some circumstance like family, job, or something like that to be in an environment that's hostile to their identity, either as non-believers or as a queer or a trans person. We have a guest who has a relevant story and is actually the person who gave me the idea for the episode. Then Daniel and I are going to share some of our own stories. Then we'll read some stories that you've submitted, and we're actually going to do a part 2 of the Gaytheist AMA because we got some great questions after that I wanted to make sure were included. And then, of course, we will end the show with Be a Better Ally. So before we jump into the show, I have an apology, a clarification, a correction, and some announcements because I'm a horrible and forgetful person. So first off, I owe an apology to my friends Mike and Lynn Clemens. So last episode, I made kind of a big deal about these idiots in this car next to me calling me a freak and laughing at me. And what I failed to mention before that was that I had actually met up with them, had an amazing time. They treated me to dinner and a movie. They were dropping their daughter off at Camp Quest. I'm head over heels in love with their little girls. And it was an amazing, amazing night. And I didn't want that to seem like the bad thing outshadowed all of that. Because sometimes I'm a person who concentrates on bad things and forgets good things, and that's not a thing that I like to do. So I apologize. Thank you, and I love you guys a lot. Also, to clarify, Mike brought up a really good point about something that I said in the last episode. There was the point about not being able to understand an experience if it's not an experience you've personally had. And I want to clarify that in saying that, you know, there's only a certain degree to which you can't understand a thing if you aren't a thing. You know, my therapist isn't trans, but she works with trans people. So obviously she gets it more than most people do. So there's a sliding scale there. And I wanted to make sure that that was clear because I don't know if that was clear in what we said before. Also, a correction. A couple episodes back, we did a Pride wrap-up, and I mentioned that there was an atheist group there, the Tri-State Free Thinkers, and I said it was the first time there was an atheist group ever at Pride. That was totally incorrect. They'd been there 3 years in a row, and it was way my bad for not knowing that. One of them reached out to me to let me know to set the record straight. So thank you guys for being there. Thank you for being allies. 2 announcements. 1, I will be speaking at the Carolinas Secular Conference, October 2nd through 4th in Myrtle Beach, South Carolina, along with some amazing folks like Rebecca Hale, Teresa McBain, Sarah Moorhead, and our good friend Bobby C. from the No Religion Required podcast. Check out carolinassecularassociation.org for tickets and more info. And my appearance there is sponsored by the book PR Pope. You can check out the site gofundme.com/PR Pope for more info on the book and to get your copy. And I won't be speaking there, but I will be at the Pennsylvania State Atheist/Humanist Conference in Harrisburg, Pennsylvania, along with Seth Andrews, Richard Carrier, friend of the show David Fitzgerald, Matt Dillahunty, Beth Presswood, and many, many more. Check out atheistpa.org for tickets and more info. Now that all the housekeeping is over, let's welcome our guest. Nat, thank you for being on the show.
Oh, thank you for having me, Kelly and Daniel.
Our pleasure.
So you reached out to me. So you want to just kind of lay out. You reached out to me on Facebook and said, "Hey, this is an experience that I've had. This might be good for the show." And I obviously thought it was. So why don't you just kind of relate to us here what you said to me when you sent me that message?
Basically, just trying to explain that I have this very unique experience, I guess. It's not very unique, of working in an environment with, I don't want to say it's all men, but it's like a hyper masculine environment where people have power over other people who are in their care. And it's in a place that's extremely backwards, I guess. Yeah. Anyways, I hate to say that because it sounds like it's a scene from Deliverance when you arrive there. It's not. It's a really normal quasi-southern area of the state. But being there, one as a woman who's like slightly masculine, it's you kind of have to. My boyfriend calls it like code shifting. You kind of have to code shift to fit in.
Oh yeah, there's actually a great segment on NPR where they talk about people of color trying to fit in like white culture.
Yeah.
It's like the same kind of thing.
It is. It's very similar because I grew up in Southern California. I grew up around people of many different ethnicities and religious beliefs and like cultures. The one thing we all had in common was we didn't have a lot of money, so there were certain things that kind of like cemented a type of camaraderie between us. Here, it's like, most of us don't make a lot of money. Most of us come from kind of lower income backgrounds, but 95% of the people I work with are white. 95% of them are, if not outright bigoted against LGBTQ community. They're just passive. So it's not a safe place to be out. And I guess I kind of, I was reading an article on bisexual pride, even though I consider myself more like a pansexual. The general populace isn't going to see it as bisexual, regardless of how I explain it.
Right. Well, and there's some intersectionality there in how people like to erase that identity and say that it's not really a thing. Yeah. Well, but it's also a point of, or a place of privilege, especially as a woman, because in this hyper masculine environment, it's seen as like purely sexual. Right? It's seen as like you're a slut, so you're cool with me, or the people who consider themselves like moral, church going people. Those are the people I don't want to know anything about me, because then, suddenly I've got targets on my back, or, whatever, that they disapprove of. It's going to be a problem. And, in my work environment, there's a way for you to write up other people you work with. There's a constant monitoring because of what we do. Everybody's always on camera. Anything that you do to screw up is written down, recorded by other people if they want to get you in trouble, if they don't like you for any reason. So it's like a high stress environment. It's there's the chance that I won't go home that night. There's all these like layers of things, and there's also that I'm like basically working within a system that I actively fight against on the outside world, just because I want healthcare and I want a steady paycheck. There's a lot of conflict in this environment. It's not just the religious aspect or the being queer or anything. It's also that there are all these different, stressors
involved in where I work. I kind of think my boyfriend has a little rougher. And then again, I also have a boyfriend, so I can appear straight, whenever I need to.
Right,
which is weird because I'm
like,
also in an open
having to do that.
So. Yeah, it is. It's I'm always cognizant of whenever I have to bring that up to protect myself.
Well, right, like if you've been in a relationship with a girl before and somebody's, like you're having one of those work conversations about your exes, you know, you have to be careful to not gender that person or to just lie about what gender they were so you don't out yourself. Yeah. And I mean, even that is just really stressful when you're in an environment like that and there's so much at stake.
Yeah, I mean, things that you would consider like kind of normal everyday stuff, you really have to like pick apart in your brain before you let them out. There's a constant, and this is what bugged me. I was a gamer an online gamer for a long time, and I just had to like kind of quit cold turkey a few years ago just because it was like such an oppressive environment. And it is, when you're constantly playing around, young men who only know how to use the particular F word to bite at other people, and there's just a constant, it's not even like homophobia, it's like a homo hatred, it's like this attack, like you're using it just to attack people. It's almost like how in prison inmates will rape each other. It's like a power game. It's all about demonstrating that any femininity is seen as weakness. I kind of grew up in an environment like that, really. So in a way it's familiar and it's also really depressing.
Right. So have you had any close calls? Well, actually, first let me ask, are you out to anyone that you work with as either queer or atheist?
Yeah, I actually have a friend who, I went to academy with him. He's, a pretty good guy. And he is also an atheist, but he says, I'm agnostic or whatever. But I'm like, whatever.
Gotcha.
You're just not a fan. But,
right.
He's great to talk to about, the stuff that goes on at work, but he's also from the area, so he's also entrenched in it, if that makes sense.
Oh, yeah.
It's like very much a cultural thing.
Mm-hmm. So have you had any close calls in conversations like that where you were like, someone almost said something, or like, coworkers like trying to find you on Facebook or anything like that?
Oh, yeah. I mean, they'll try to find me on Facebook, but I've been hiding in plain sight on Facebook for years. But I've also had like coworkers who like it'll get out that they're like, "Are you really a lesbian?" And I'm like, no, it's and I hate that any of that has to happen. I shouldn't have to be vehemently denying like basically a part of myself just to feel like I'm okay at work. I mean, part of it too is not that like I feel physically threatened. Part of it is that I feel like my job's threatened by other people, that they're just going to make things up to get me fired.
Right, because
so that I'm not being fired
like
for that. Yeah. Because you can't really fire people for being, bisexual or a woman, or but you can make things. You can make it appear that someone else is incompetent or is doing something dangerous or is having some kind of affair with someone else. There's rumors constantly going around that I'm sleeping with somebody at work, and I'm just kind of used to it at this point. Because if you're a woman obviously.
Well, right. That's what I was going to ask. It's because you're the woman or at work, or one of the few at work. So obviously, you're a sexual object as opposed to like just another person that works there.
Because I'm not of menopausal age. That's the only thing that saves you.
Oh.
Sadly enough, yeah. There are also the women who won't sleep with anybody there. They're considered lesbians. It doesn't matter if they actually are or not.
Gotcha. So if you do, you're a slut. If you don't, it's because you're a lesbian.
It's like the 1950s there. It really is. It's like, yeah. And it's because I'm not married. It's like, oh, I live with my boyfriend. That's actually really taboo there too.
Oh yeah. I have a friend who used to lead worship at a church, and and they asked him to step down from leading worship because he moved in with his girlfriend before they were married.
Yeah.
Like that was the only thing that he had done to warrant that. So, yeah.
Yeah, it's like a twisted Mayberry, there was even, oh God, the racist stuff drives me nuts. I mean, I work with people of different races. I mean, there's not very many, but then you have people who just come in there with fists flying who are like, someone better have an argument with me about this rebel flag shit, because that's the thing that, really gets me going, and this ain't about race, it's about Southern pride. There's been quite
that was a really good accent, by the way.
Things like
well, I guess you probably hear it enough so that you can imitate it pretty well, I guess.
I can code shift it that way too. It's almost aggravating, but it just happens normally. And I've only been down here since March, but it's so infuriating. It's like I want to have like the loudest, most, aggravating argument with people like that, and I cannot do it. They will turn against me like...
Right, and the point is that they're allowed...
in a split second.
They're allowed to bring up all of those things because most people there agree with them. But if you stick up and say, well, actually, then you're the person causing the problem.
Yeah, and, there's a guy I work with, and he is one of those people who no one knows what race he is. So he told me one day, he's like, how would you feel if you get called Osama bin Laden and terrorist and all this? And I was like, are you kidding me? People actually say that. He's like, yeah, that's just other officers. They say it to my face. I was like, what kind of world do we live in where you can call people who you think, who you say you respect, like shit like that? Really? I mean, some of the things he was saying that his coworkers say to him, I was like, I don't know what I would do. I don't know if I would respond with violence or what, but it's just horrible.
And I don't want to, breach any privacy, but just vaguely saying, I mean, you work in an environment where those two people's lives could depend on each other at some point.
Yes. Yeah. I mean, that's the thing is like, I'm there to protect people, and I'm there to provide a service within the prison environment. I'm not there to I'm not a cop. I'm not really a peace officer, but when things go down, it's our job to, one, protect each other, and two, protect the public, and three, protect, the prisoners. And a lot of people lose sight of that, and they get really caught up in the whole macho pissing contest aspect of it. There's they tell you when you first get hired, this job attracts a certain kind of person,
right? Because of the power dynamic.
Yeah, and I was thinking that's just so sad. And I've met so many people who I look at them and I'm like, this is just really sad. Even though those people are the kind of people that would threaten me and throw beer cans at me out of their truck and, make my life a living hell when I was younger. Those are people I have to rely on now if something goes down.
Right. So wrapping up here, talk to me how do you deal with this kind of stuff? Like, do you have a special kind of like venting strategy that you use? Do you grin and bear it while you're at work? Like, how do you decompress from being in that environment?
I'm not sure. Actually, I'm not really sure exactly what I do. I do spend a lot of time focusing on my relationship at home and trying to make sure that I'm not bringing work home. The stress of work, yes, has caused, issues. I think it does with anybody in a high stress job. You kind of take that home a little bit and you let it bother you a little bit, and then it kind of builds up. So
right, and there's the
anticipation
of having to go back to it the next day.
Exactly. So I've been working on that, and my job has gotten easier as it's gone along, but then it's also gotten a little harder too. Different aspects will get easier, and certain ones will just keep sticking in my craw. But this is not something I want to be a career. It's something that's like, as luck would have it, I probably will end up doing that longer than I want to. But ultimately, I hope it'll be a learning experience and not something that my life will revolve around. Like, I hope that nothing happens or it doesn't drive a wedge between me and my other relationships or my home life.
Well, thank you so much for coming on the show and sharing your story and being super open. That's kind of our thing. That's what we're about here, is being open and vulnerable and sharing stories and stuff like that. So I definitely appreciate you coming on.
No, it's no problem. Thank you for having me.
Thanks. And we will be right back with Daniel and I's personal stories on the Gaytheists Manifesto.
Hello, I'm Alan Cumming. Live Out Loud is calling on the LGBT community to help improve life for gay teens. Take what you know and gay it forward through the Homecoming Project, a chance to return to your old high school and share your story with LGBTQ youth. Your life experiences and wisdom can prove invaluable to teens who may be struggling with their own identities and paths in life. One day can make a lasting difference. Gay it forward with the Homecoming Project. Find us at liveoutloud.info to learn how you can get involved today.
Are you tired of being informed by all the information Callie's giving you?
You wish you had a podcast to listen to that didn't make you think about confusing things and difficult social issues. Waiting for Wrath, the beer-guzzling podcast you listen to when you're done being informed.
Before we jump back into the show, it's time to thank our patrons. This week, we're recognizing Ayame and Rudy. Thank you so much for believing in us enough to contribute to us financially and for being a part of this movement. Patrons of the Gaytheists Manifesto have access to all sorts of cool stuff, like a big shout out on the show, premium content, including an audio journal I've decided to keep documenting the more personal stuff I don't dive into on the show, and an exclusive patrons-only hangout once a month. If you're so inclined, head over to patreon.com/The Gaytheists Manifesto to become a part of this movement and support the show. Thank you. Welcome back to the Gaytheists Manifesto. Today we're talking about being behind enemy lines. We're sharing stories of being forced to be in situations where you're in an environment because of your family, because of your job, that you're in an environment that's hostile to your identity, either as a non-believer or as an LGBT person. So, Daniel, what do you got?
Well, I want to start this out saying that my life today is a lot better than my life earlier on, just because things have gotten easier for me. I think part of that is because I've surrounded myself with the right kind of people and just become a stronger person. And also I think that society has begun slowly sort of coming around. But something that I had to deal with, I think that would probably be the worst part of once I had come out, was literally every job that I worked at once I had actually come out and was being open about who I am. And let me just clear this up. Being open didn't mean that I was, quote, flaunting it. There seems to be this really visceral response to anyone who's being open, just being who they are openly, as flaunting. And
well, right, everybody's allowed to talk about their straight relationships, but as soon as you say a word about your gay relationship, you're throwing it in everyone's face.
Yeah, exactly. And I was never, it's just not part of my personality. I wasn't ever saying, things that were, explicitly sexual or, harassing people. But something I had to deal with was constantly hearing slurs behind my back. Whether passing by and then hearing them say something that they didn't think I could hear, and then, hearing laughing. In 2007, I worked at a diagnostics lab where I basically just worked sort of in the bottom tier of the company, processing specimens as they came in. And that department happened to have a very large Filipino population. I think it was probably half to 75% Filipino folks. And I'm just sort of naturally curious and interested in different cultures and languages. So, I began learning a few words of Tagalog, which is the native language of the Philippines. And I was surprised that there was a certain word that I learned, which I won't say it here, but basically it's a gay slur. I was surprised at how often I began hearing that word being spoken behind my back as I'm passing by again, like I said earlier. Things like that. Now I'm a freelancer. I do freelance web and graphic design by trade now. So I don't have to go into an office every day. And so that's something that I don't have to deal with anymore. And I'm sort of otherwise in a bubble of sorts. Like I said, I don't go out very much. And the people that I do surround myself with are, progressive, wonderful folks who I can be myself with. But the one sort of thorn in my paw at this point is just whenever I do a family event where, the rare maybe once, twice a year where my whole family gets together, it's very stressful with my mom's homophobia because she talks very openly about being a Christian, which I have no problem with that whatsoever. It doesn't bother me to listen to her talk about Christian things until she begins sort of hating on other groups, and that's when I start to get a problem with it. But she's very open about her disdain for gay people, and of course knowing that I'm gay, and that makes things really difficult because if I say something, if I speak out, then I'm treated as being the problem in the situation and sort of like, Daniel, this is why we can't ever have nice things. This is why we can't have nice get-togethers because you always have to blah, blah, blah. And it's like, I'm happy for it not to come up at all, but when you're saying something that is extremely hurtful to me about gay people, yeah, I'm going to speak up. I'm going to say, and it's usually just something along the lines of, hey, that's really hurtful. Don't say that. Or, that's not true. That's a lie. Because, queer folks know there are so many politicians and people in the media just talking about queer folks like we're just worthless trash. So, and obviously, there's a really distorted perspective of who we are and what we do in society by these people. So that makes things really difficult. Of course, being an atheist adds on to that because there are times, and this is almost exclusively with my parents during family events. Things will come up that like I said, I'm never going to put anyone down for expressing a religious belief or something like that. But when it encroaches on me, when someone says, well, like when my mom says, well, I'm praying for you I'm praying that you'll realize that homosexuality is a disease and things like that. That's sort of a double whammy. It's like, first of all, don't pray for me, and second of all, I don't need to be cured. So that's really the only thing that I have to deal with nowadays, and I consider myself really lucky because I can work from home. I don't have to put up with bigoted folks in an office setting, and the only other time I'd say that comes up is whenever I go to a party, which is pretty rare these days. I'm a homebody most of the time, but going to parties can be a little bit stressful because if I don't know, if it's new people that I don't know and I don't know anything about them, I feel like I have to be very careful about what I reveal about myself.
Yeah, we've talked about that before. So bro, that last time you totally banged your girlfriend, like, that was cool, right? And then you're like, yeah, but...
Yeah, exactly. And, I'm not gonna say that my anxiety doesn't play a role in my perception of these things, but...
Well, to be fair, though, that anxiety may be triggered by the fact that you always have to worry about that.
My anxiety is largely informed by experiences that I've actually been through that were really unpleasant. And so, of course, it's not fair for me to apply that mindset to anyone I meet, but it's just a situation that I'd mostly rather avoid. So
yeah, but the point that I was just making is that it's not something that's just all in your head. Like, it's not just anxiety for anxiety's sake. It's like, it's because these are things that you've actually dealt with.
Yeah, exactly. So, like I said, I feel pretty lucky. My life is pretty. It's pretty easy for me to be a gay person and an atheist in my current life. This current chapter of my life, I should say. So I feel really lucky. What about you?
Well, I have a few. And some of these maybe stray a little bit more into like just times that people have made me feel uncomfortable, but I guess it's kind of the same subject. Mm-hmm. So my very first memory of knowing what someone that I cared about thought about LGBT anything was I used to go to church with my grandma, and I was probably 13, 14-ish at the time, early teens, whatever that was. And I went to church with her, and this was when Ellen DeGeneres had come out as gay. And I'm like, this was like early 90s, or late 90s. So, I mean, we were definitely not where we are now with that whole thing. And the pastor was talking from stage about all these companies that had pulled advertising from Ellen's show, and how everyone in the church should go patronize these companies for standing up for morality. And one of those companies happened to be Wendy's. So where do you think Grandma and I went after church? Through the Wendy's drive-thru. And my grandma made sure to tell someone that worked there, we're patronizing you because you did this. Yeah. And that was kind of right around the time where I was kind of starting to struggle with myself in that way. So that was pretty, that was a pretty rough first experience to have there.
And I don't know if people really understand this, because I've heard, everyone knows about the Chick-fil-A thing. And I think a lot of people still think that the whole Chick-fil-A debacle was just because the CEO was a Christian and was being open about it, and then suddenly everyone descended on him. When it really was, it was that they were donating company profits to anti-gay institutions, supporting things like the Kill the Gays bill in Uganda and things like that. So to have Christians especially because my mom would do the same thing. She would intentionally support companies who were anti-gay, and it really feels like an attack. I don't know if people who haven't been in this situation understand. It's not just a roll your eyes moment. It feels like an attack. You're literally saying, I would rather support this company, and because of views that they have about you that are hateful, than make you, my own family member, feel safe and supported.
It's just,
it's hard.
So, and I've talked before about the last job that I had, and, something I think I talked about it in one of my audio journals on the Patreon page, shameless plug. I don't know if I've talked about it here, But really, I've only been Callie 100% of my life for like 5 months now. Even though I've been out and transitioning for almost 2 years. And the reason for that is because I wasn't Callie at work until I started the job that I have now in February. So I'm still kind of learning how to navigate the workplace as a queer and a trans person, because, you know, that's not something that I have a universal experience for. But before, when I started coming out and I started getting into activism and, being active in the community and going to events and being on the news and all this stuff before I was Callie at work. And, there were a bunch of people who were customers of my company who I knew were news junkies. And I'm just like, one of them is going to see me on the news as Callie and they're going to say something to my boss about it. I just know it. And that was in the back of my head every single time. When Leela Alcorn died and, all eyes were on Cincinnati in that situation, and news stations were all over it and they wanted to talk to trans people. And if you put a camera in front of my face, I'm going to talk. That's just who I am, for better or for worse, I guess. But, and I would do those things knowing, and I would actually send a text message to my boss and say, hey, look, like, I was on the news tonight. I don't know if anybody saw me, but, I got texts from friends of mine, like, oh, hey, I saw you on Channel 5, So, I almost expected fallout from that. And thankfully it never happened. But it was a constant worry. And, almost everybody has Facebook, and almost all of my clients had Facebook. And because I had my phone, I had Facebook on my phone with my phone number attached to it, all of my contacts would be suggested to me as friends, including our customers. So I was wondering how many of their profiles did I show up as a suggested friend in? And I did find, there were a few of our clients who did find out, and I never got the chance to talk to them about it, but they sure asked my boss and my coworkers a bunch of questions, and I never did find out how they knew. But one of the companies that worked for us, or one of the companies that hired us, contractors, found out. And that made things really uncomfortable, because my coworkers would tell me that they would make jokes and say terrible things about me, and then I would go to a house and be working with them. And that was really hard. And, they would say really horrible, like, misogynist and homophobic and transphobic things. And I would just think to myself, like, beforehand, I would think to myself, like, they don't know that they're talking about me right now. Right. And then afterwards, I'm like, well, they have to know they're talking about me, and they must just not care. And the worst, the worst part of it was, and I kind of sort of maybe have a little bit of myself to blame for this, because I didn't stand up for myself when I feel like I should have. But so my boss had promised me that I was going to be able to transition on the job, and it was a really complicated set of arrangements, and it actually worked out for about a month. And it involved me not being in the field anymore, going into people's houses and installing these, crazy electronics and home automation systems and stuff. And he was like, hey, we're really, really slammed. I really, really could use you at this job. And once this job's finished, like, you can go back to the office and, and because I'm a team player, I said, yeah, okay. I didn't really know, because I had been out of the field for like a month at that point, and I knew all of the guys at this company knew. So, like, they're not stupid. I'm sure they put 2 and 2 together. And then I'm all of a sudden back in the field, and everyone's and that was the thing, like, my boss would go back and forth between calling me my old name and calling me Callie. And I'm like, dude, you don't understand. Like, that puts me in danger.
Yeah.
Like, I appreciate what you're trying to do, because I could see him when other people were around, he would call me my old name. And then when it was just us, he would call me Callie. And I'm like, but you never know who's listening. And, like, if it's the wrong person, that could put me in danger. And, I never told him that, but I didn't really know what to do. And I felt very, very unsafe at work for a very long time because of that. And I eventually ended up because I never ended up getting out of the field again. And I just kept getting sent to other jobs and other jobs and other jobs. And I eventually had to quit because I knew that I was not going to be able to transition there because my boss would never let that happen. So that's the full story. When I say that I lost my job over transition, it's a little bit more complicated than that. I was more forced to quit than fired, but it's the same kind of concept.
Yeah, still it's something that had it not been for this one aspect of you, it wouldn't have happened.
Right, exactly. And then, generally speaking now, like I said, the company that I work for now has a really good, inclusive non-discrimination policy and insurance and inclusive environment. When I have chosen to out myself to certain people by saying certain things, I haven't gotten anything more than like some puzzled looks and then, oh, okay. So it's been a good experience thus far, but it's still awkward because you never know who you're talking to because, again, like Nat was saying in the previous segment, you never know who's listening and you never know who's going to take offense and who's going to try and get you in trouble just because they don't like you. Mm-hmm. So, that's a constant worry, but it's more in the back of my head now. It's not, I don't feel actively unsafe or threatened at work every day now like I used to, which is awesome, and I'm very, very grateful for that. But I
remember how miserable you were at your old job, and
yeah,
for good reason. So I'm really happy that you found this new place.
Me too. And then really there's. What's funny is, I spend so much time doing trans activism and LGBT activism that sometimes I feel like the atheism part of it comes second. And it doesn't really come second for me. I mean, they're very intertwined as far as I'm concerned. But somebody asked me at work the other day, how are you doing? And I was like, oh, I'm freaking great. And they're like, oh, really? Why are you so great? And then I was about to say, I just got my first speaking gig at an atheist conference. And I was like, oh, wait. Because she had talked about how, because this was the person that I had come out to as bi and that I'd come out to as trans. She asked me what I thought of the whole Bruce Jenner situation, quote unquote, if you remember that story.
I do.
And she was telling me that when she was talking with her boyfriend, her fiance actually, that one of the things that he was saying was that gay marriage was unbiblical or whatever. So like they were fighting over from a religious point of view. So I was like, she might be religious, so I don't know if she's going to take offense to me saying like, oh yeah, I'm going to this atheist conference with a bunch of people that think your religion's stupid to talk about how your religion hurts people like me.
Yeah, that's awkward.
So yeah, I didn't go so far. I was just like, oh, I'm going to be speaking at this conference. It's going to be awesome. So, yeah, so that's a whole nother thing.
Yeah, I feel sort of a low level anxiety constantly about being gay, first of all, and then atheist also sort of adds to that, because I didn't clarify this earlier or go into it, but I do work at home. I am a freelancer, so I don't have an office, but I'm always worried, when I get a new client, that they're going to Google me or look me up on social media, and I have my Facebook page locked down to only that my friends can see it, because the first thing that I think is, what if they find out that I'm gay or atheist or an outspoken feminist or something like that, and then they decide they don't want to work with me anymore? Because when you're in a work situation, those people can make your lives miserable. In my case, I never felt that my job was in danger for being gay, so I'm really lucky on that front. But when you're a freelancer like me, your income isn't guaranteed. So losing if I were to lose a client because they found out that I was gay or an atheist, that could mean that it's going to be that much harder to pay my rent that month. And I really struggle with that because I want to be open, and I don't want to hide, because I think hiding is part of what makes our movement more difficult to sort of break through. But I don't know what else to do. I don't really know how to traverse this aspect of my life.
Yeah, I mean, I always tell people, be as open as you're comfortable being. You know what I mean? Like, you shouldn't have to feel compelled to sacrifice your safety or your security. You got to eat. You got to have a place to live. You got to be able to pay your bills. And sometimes you have to make sacrifices for doing that. And if you have to do it, I've done it. I'm frankly not the biggest fan of the company that I work for from the customer side of things, but they're a great company to work for. So, that's a conflict that I have. I feel like I'm kind of self-serving in that way.
Yeah.
But again, I have to pay the bills. I need health care. So I do it. Now, obviously, the goal is to become a full-time activist. That would be sweet. Patreon.com/The Gaytheist Manifesto. Wink, wink. But yeah, that's something that I think every activist struggles with a little bit. That if we depend on those kinds of things for our income, it's really tough to balance those things. Mm-hmm. We are going to take a quick break. We will be back with listener stories on the Gaytheist Manifesto.
The staff of Secular Coalition for America lobbies U.S. Congress on issues of separation of church and state, and they've become a powerhouse for change in the United States government. You'll definitely want to subscribe to receive their email action alerts. These are updates for important issues and ones that you can get involved with directly. And hopefully, you'll consider making a contribution to the Secular Coalition for America to help them continue fighting for your equality. You can do it all at secular.org.
Here's an excerpt from The God Virus by Darrell W. Ray.
Every day, religion affects us in ways we may not realize. It makes your Uncle Ned spend hours praying for you. It gives your Baptist neighbor a reason to reject her own child who married a Catholic. It teaches your Pentecostal sister to spank her children to keep them from going to hell. It requires a Catholic priest to deny his sex drive. It causes people to give enormous amounts of money to religious organizations, and causes you to avoid talking to your cousin Jenny for fear she may try to convert you to Jehovah's Witnesses. Religion has both obvious and subtle influences on you and on society. This book explores the impact of religion on you and your world, and it draws open the curtain of mystery and offers ways to understand and make informed decisions about religion. Have you ever wondered what makes religion so powerful? What makes people profess deep faith even as they act in ways that betray that faith? What makes people blind to the irrationalities of their own religion, yet see clearly the problems of other religions? How does it weave its way into our political system? If these and similar questions interest you, this book will help you understand its power in you, your family, and your culture.
The God Virus by Darrell W. Ray is available at atheistaudiobooks.com.
And welcome back to the Gaytheist Manifesto. Today we're telling stories from behind enemy lines, talking about times that we've been forced to be in situations that were hostile to us as non-believers or as LGBT folks. So Daniel, do you want to read the first listener story?
The first one I have is from my friend JD. He's a cis gay guy, and he said, when I worked at SAIC, I had two bosses. One was the facilities manager, who worked across the office from me, and the other was the head of sustainability in San Diego, with whom I had a weekly conference call. I had a good rapport with the sustainability chief. I did not have a good rapport with, I'll just give his initial, R, who demoted me, gave me facilities management assignments with no clear objectives, failed to train me, and on at least a few occasions was just utterly condescending. He asked me once why I wanted to work at SAIC, and I told him that at least in part it was because I had gathered it was a good company for LGBT employees and that sustainable development was important to me. When I tried to RSVP my partner at the time to the company picnic, R pulled me into his office, closed the door, and asked me to keep my sexual orientation on a don't ask, don't tell basis. If this constituted a verbal warning, I was unaware of that at the time. I later tried to put him on his partner, on my insurance benefits, and the same day I found the paperwork I attempted to fax put face up on my desk. That day I was called into R's office for a conference call with HR, not my own point of contact, and summarily fired for tardiness and dress code violations. Once in this conversation, he referred to me as Gay D in what seemed to be a Freudian slip. At the time, Fairfax County did not have any protections for sexual minorities against retaliation in the workplace. Being that Virginia is also a right-to-work state, I have no idea if I have any legal case.
Yeah, and the sad reality is there's a good chance that he doesn't.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, well, and this is an example of what Nat was talking about earlier, where people will get you fired if they don't like you for one reason or another. Even if the company has a really strong non-discrimination policy and all that sort of stuff. I mean, some of that stuff's hard to suss out, like, what exactly is going on. So if somebody plays their cards right, they can get rid of you just because they don't like you, because you're gay or because you're trans or because you're atheist or whatever. And, it doesn't have to be legit, and you can still face those consequences. So, I think that's something that's important to know, is that even having those protections in place isn't always, a guarantee that bad things won't happen. It's a start and it's important, but it's definitely not a guarantee.
Yeah, and this is also another example of a gay person not being flamboyant or attempting to flaunt sexuality, but just doing something like, oh, I want to put my boyfriend on my health insurance, so I have to.
Right, God forbid, right?
Yeah,
why are you throwing it in everybody's faces that you want to take care of your boyfriend?
Exactly. So, so as you can see, it's and people will see stuff like that, and they're really, it's what it comes down to is they just don't want to see it, and it's like, well, I'm sorry, but I'm not going to be completely invisible to you, and I'm not going to turn my entire life inside out just so you don't have to see something you don't want to see.
Okay, and next I'll read Danielle's story. Danielle says, I grew up in an atheist liberal family in South Carolina. I was denied admission to a non-Christian private school because I couldn't get a recommendation from a pastor. I also tried the church thing in high school, not because I believed, but because that's where all of my friends were. My parents always joked that we had to keep the blinds closed on Sundays so people wouldn't know we were at home. Which is kind of funny, but there was probably some real consequences to be had there. If, in freaking South Carolina,
they probably had to put up with people asking them questions and where were you, and putting up.
What church do you go to?
Yeah,
not do you go to church, but what church do you go to?
And also, when you live in a small town, especially a small town in the South. Everyone knows everyone, and it can be really difficult if you're sort of like on the outs with the rest of the community. It sucks, but there is a valid fear in place, because what are they going to vandalize my property? Am I going to have to deal with any? I don't even want to go into, like, there's such a spectrum of abuse and mistreatment.
Lots of bad things.
Lots of bad things. I'll just leave it at that. And it sucks, and that's for no other reason than the community doesn't like you, and there's this weird mob mentality that comes into play.
Right. So you want to read the next one?
Sure thing. This comes from my friend Larry. He's a super good friend of mine. He's also a cis gay guy, who says, I was very active in my church as a kid and as a teenager, even though I knew I was gay and had dealt with a lot of internal conflict about it already. Near the end of high school, I attended a regional teen revival with my church and my youth pastor, who I adored. I came out to him privately and asked him what I should do. I wanted to be a good Christian, but I knew I couldn't pray the gay away. He basically told me that I was made by God to love him only, and that my lack of attraction to women was being manipulated by the devil. He said I was meant to be alone. I began questioning everything more seriously that day. So the good thing that came out of that is that began a journey out of his faith and religion. But
right, which high five on that. But God, that sucks.
Yeah, because that's something that actually I've heard this come up a lot, and I've heard it in my own life too, where gay kids are told by Christian leaders and their parents that it might just be your lot in life to be alone. this may be something you always struggle with, and it'd be better for you to be alone for the rest of your life than to, quote, give in to the sin of it and have a relationship. And that is so not fair to tell anybody.
Yeah, well, and I've had stuff like that thrown at me, like, because there are people who actually believe that and people who buy that.
Mm-hmm.
And I had somebody throw at me in a conversation once, well, I knew a gay guy once who was totally happy, and he just accepted that, homosexual orientation isn't a sin. It's acting on that's a sin. So he just didn't have sex or intimate relations with people, and he was totally happy. And, I just think to myself, like, I'm very fond of saying you're not in my head, so you can't tell me what my experience is.
Right.
So I want to be careful about doing that to that person, but holy crap, am I skeptical?
And even if that did work for one person, even if that did work for him.
Right, exactly. So if it works for him and he genuinely is totally happy, great, that's fine. There are obviously people who have less of a need for intimacy and for, sexuality than other people do. I mean, there are asexual and demisexual people, and that's all cool.
Yeah.
But to force yourself into being that because of religion, I have a really, really hard time accepting that that's in any way a healthy thing for a person to do.
Yeah. And also nobody gets to tell anybody that they should live their life on a template of someone else. That's just not how the human race works.
Right. Well, it's just like saying, like, hey, racism is a problem. And you're like, well, I saw this black guy on TV saying that racism wasn't a problem.
Right.
Okay, but, like, still, really.
So,
yeah.
What do you got next?
So, this is from Alicia. She says, many holidays, I sit there and listen to one person in particular rattle off every anti-LGBT/atheist/liberal/Democrat/socialist joke in his arsenal. I've been told I can fire back, but I don't feel like making the holiday dinner table a platform for ideological warfare. So I just bite my tongue and keep my head down. Sometimes it sucks being the bigger person, but I have 2 kids who are watching, and I need to be a better example for them. Which definitely hats off to you on that one, because I don't know if I could do that. but I respect that. And I've kind of been there. At family stuff before. I haven't gone to much family stuff lately, but before it was never so much about LGBT stuff, but about religion and about poor people and about race and stuff like that. I've definitely had to make the choice, like, well, they're saying something that's really, really stupid. Mm-hmm. Do I speak up, or do I just let it go to avoid the argument because it's family and we're supposed to be having fun here? And I think it's easy to say, like, well, of course you speak up. I mean, it's easy to say that, but to actually do it and have that turn into a conflict, like, sometimes you want to avoid that, and I totally get that, and I totally respect that.
Yeah, and also, I mean, you and I are really outspoken people by nature, and I'm never one to back away from an argument.
Yeah, and I start twitching and shit, like.
But some people, I know plenty of people who are very progressive, who they just don't like confrontation and they don't like to argue, and obviously, one's skills in arguing. And being outspoken do not correlate to how right or wrong their ideas are.
Boy, is that the truth. So,
it kind of sucks when you know someone is being bigoted or just plain terrible in some degree, and there's just, it's not in your nature to confront them or to speak out, and even if you do, this person might tear you to shreds, and
right, and because you're the one that spoke up and said something back, again, you're the problem.
Right. Yeah. Whenever there's a status quo, even if it's wrong, which it often is, if you're the one speaking out, you're the problem always.
All right, you want to read the next one?
Yeah. So this comes from our friend Kristen.
Friend of the show, Kristen.
Friend of the show. Yeah, she did the Mormon episode with us.
Star of the Mormons episode.
She says, in boot camp, I was required to pray with the rest of the division, else I incur the wrath of the petty officers. It's boot camp, so there's not really anyone I can protest to. Plus, the fear and intimidation is a major factor in not reporting it. If I had the opportunity to report it, there was no guarantee anything would be done about it, and petty officer retaliation would likely happen.
Yeah, and I mean, frankly, we need to do an entire episode on military issues, because there's hours worth of content on that subject. But I mean, I know both LGBT and atheist folks who have told similar stories about being in the military. Some pretty actually horrific stories.
Mm-hmm.
But yeah, and I mean, and I have a friend who he told me that he refused to bow his head when they were praying. And, you know, he said he generally, like, sometimes people would say something to him, but, you know, I mean, he had, like, the regulation that allowed it to happen memorized chapter and verse. So, I mean, he would stand there, not say anything, not disrupt or anything like that, but he would be like, look, this is my right to do. And yeah, I mean, he absolutely was risking retaliation there, even though obviously you're not supposed to have retaliation like that happen, especially if you're not doing anything that's actually against regs. But, I mean, that's... you know, that's still a risk of, you know, that sort of thing still happens.
Yeah, and also this is another example of when perceived persecution from Christians versus perceived persecution from atheists.
Right. I'm sorry, but you can't proselytize to soldiers. You're oppressing me.
Right. I think Christians would be hard pressed to come up with examples of times when they were put in a situation where if they expressed their faith in any way or made their faith in any way known, they could lose their job or you know, put up with mistreatment and abuse, because it doesn't happen. Yeah, you don't get to make other people, you know, you don't get to burden other people with your religious ideas. But in this case, she literally just didn't want to pray with the rest of the division. That was all. She just didn't want to do it, and that was not a good idea for her to do, and that sucks.
And next up, this is from Corey. Corey said he was forced to go to synagogue when I was younger and pretty much defied and rejected everything straight to the faces of the rabbis there who were trying to force me into the whole bar mitzvah thing. Not unkind people, just very big into their faith and couldn't accept it that I didn't believe. Needless to say, and not the kindest of my choices in retaliation at such a young age, but a lot of the yarmulkes that belonged to the congregation seemed to ... mysteriously vanish ... during my forced time there.
You know, I gotta admit, obviously I don't agree with Judaism as a religion, but Jews throw some amazing parties.
Do they? I don't think I've ever been to one.
Yeah, I went to a bat mitzvah and it was fun. I'm not gonna lie, but yeah.
Well, that's cool. You know, no harm there. I mean, if you throw a good party, I'm down.
Yeah, me too.
I can't sing in Hebrew, but
yeah, that's part of the fun.
Oh,
I'm a bad atheist. The last one is from another friend of the show, Seth, who actually did the Mormon episode with Kristen.
Yes.
And he was telling me a story about...
He's not the last one, by the way. I have more.
Oh, my last one, I should say. He told me a story about his Aunt Loretta who passed away. And
oh, God, he told me this story.
Yeah, his boyfriend wrote a poem about her. And he posted on, I don't know if it was Facebook or some form of social media or in some group.
They had like a family group message on Facebook.
A family group message. Okay, that makes more sense. He posted, quote, "I don't believe she's in heaven, but I do believe her suffering is over, which is the important thing." And he shared the poem. So what he did here was two things. He mentioned that he has a boyfriend who wrote a poem, and he clarified, "I don't particularly believe that she's in heaven, but you know, her suffering is over. We can all agree with that." And the response he got was, "Not interested in your atheist evangelism or gay militancy today. I'm tired of hearing about all the gay stuff. I get it. You like guys. It's time to heal, so please keep it loving and not everything else." And again, gay militancy meaning he mentioned that he had a boyfriend. Literally just mentioned the existence of having a boyfriend who wrote a poem.
And listen, if there, and I'm just going to throw this out there, if there is anyone who could be classified as militant, it is definitely not Seth.
Yeah.
Seth is a very easy. He's an outspoken fella, and he definitely speaks his mind. But he is anything but militant. Seth is an extremely easygoing, very kind, very very nice guy.
Yeah, Seth's a big teddy bear. So, but again, it goes back to this thing of, just like on TV, heterosexual couples have been holding hands, kissing, and having sex on TV for decades. But you have one episode where two women kiss, and suddenly it's shoving homosexuality down our throats. And it's just a really stupid paradigm that unfortunately we have to deal with.
Yeah. So next I have one from Donna. Donna says, I was a Christian and attended church, youth group, and Bible study. I hadn't even admitted to myself that I liked women, and the sentiments of the church and churchgoers kept me firmly in that spot until a couple of years after I left Christianity and was identifying with paganism. It was a work friend who prodded me to be honest with myself. I was also in the awkward situation where two guys in my area at work were making fun of the Born This Way thing. That being the Lady Gaga trend, that I was born this way and that's okay kind of thing. One guy was pretty hostile about it due to his mother leaving his father for a woman. I emailed the other guy and said, be careful what you say about LGBT because you never know who might be listening. I had to out myself in that conversation, and we are friends now. The other guy was an epic douchebag who'd made jokes about man-eating lesbians. In all caps, that makes no sense.
Yeah, I don't think there's ever been a lesbian who dined on men.
I was going to say cannibalistic lesbians. I don't know. There has to have been a cannibalistic lesbian in history somewhere.
Well, I mean, wherever you are, stop doing that.
Right. You're giving the rest of us a bad name.
Yeah. And also, this again, like, this is just.
I know one part they didn't eat.
Oh God! Well played. I can't say anything serious after that. Just let's go to the next story. I'm about to say, there's a thing that happens, and I'm like, I can't.
Just dead puppies. Think about dead puppies.
No.
Okay, and Victoria, who I just gotta say is someone who I love dearly. She's been going through a rough time, and I love her a lot. So if you're listening, I love you. And this one's kind of a long one, but it's an important story. I owned a growing photography business and got most of my clientele through a family friend. Well, that family friend was extremely religious, while I was an outspoken atheist. I firmly believe that religion and work should not go hand in hand, as religion is an extremely inappropriate topic to bring up in a professional setting. Even while photographing very religious weddings, I focused solely on what my clients wanted. That time wasn't about me, and it never even crossed my mind that I should be offended because someone else has different views than me. I never once spoke to my clients about my religious affiliation. The family friend informed me one day that their friend's family wanted me to take their family portraits. I gladly accepted and awaited an email from them stating the time and location that was best for them. I was still living with my mom at the time, and my mom told me to sit down at the table because she wanted to talk to me about something. I had never told her that I'm an atheist because she used to be so strongly opinionated against non-believers. I specifically remember when I was 11 or 12 and starting to not believe anymore, my mom and I were in the car together and she said, quote, "Nobody living under my roof will ever call themselves an atheist." When I sat down with her, she informed me that the potential clients did not want me to take their family portraits anymore because I, quote, discriminate against Christians. Apparently, one of the parents had somehow viewed my private Facebook account and saw that I had posted quotes from Aristotle and the Founding Fathers who said negative things about religion and people who blindly believe, and some really morbid Bible quotes that get overlooked by Christians. I was told that because the client ran a large business, he had software that would allow him to view my private social media profiles. She then told me that I need to stop posting things like that on Facebook because it would get me in even more trouble with employers later on, and that it's disrespectful toward Christians. all of my regular clients, who are also really devout Christians, went elsewhere for their portraits. After that, the family friend who had initially helped me forbade me from talking to their kids, one of whom is almost an adult, because I'm a, quote, bad influence. After I had to stop doing photography, and because I had, quote, too many romantic partners for this family friend's taste. It's still very uncomfortable, even though this happened years ago. So now I use a separate Facebook account where I go by my pen name and have a fake location to communicate with my like-minded friends, and I have a separate account for family and coworkers where I put on a mask and pretend to be someone else.
Oh, man, that's terrible.
Yeah, well, and that goes back to what you were saying earlier about being a freelance web designer. You never know who's going to see that stuff, and it's that balance between wanting to be outspoken and about everything that you believe in and that you think is important, and needing to pay the bills. Like, that's a conflict that no one should have to have, but so many people actually do.
Yeah, and it's not because we think that what we're doing is wrong. It's because the way other people think can be problematic. And, I wouldn't hesitate doing business with a Christian just because they were a Christian, unless they would have to do something really terrible to make me not want to do business with them. But knowing that they were a Christian or a Jewish person or a Muslim, that by itself is not a problem for me. But unfortunately, if you're an atheist, that can be a problem for people.
Well, and it goes back to, this recurring theme that, because I'm sure none of those people are shy about throwing out everything that they believe in and posting memes and quotes and everything about how silly atheists are and about how, there's only one true God and his son is Jesus and all that sort of stuff. But as soon as you say, well, I disagree, then, you're throwing it in everyone's faces and you're the problem.
Right. And that goes back to because Christianity is the status quo. Right. And when you're in the status quo, whenever you're challenging that, you're typically the problem and you're treated as such.
Right. Well, and so those were all really, really good stories. I mean, obviously not good in that, they're some uncomfortable and sad things, but thank you all so much for contributing. This is the second time we've asked for a significant contribution from folks and gotten a pretty overwhelming response in return. So that's super, super awesome. So thank you all for being a part of that. It's really, really cool.
Yeah, thanks a lot.
So we're going to take a quick break, and when we come back, we're going to do Gaytheist AMA Part 2. We got a couple of questions after the fact that I thought were really, really good, and I felt bad that we didn't get them in time to get them into the AMA episode. So we're going to do a quick segment where we answer those questions coming up. More Gaytheist Manifesto.
Today in school, I learned a lot. In chemistry, I learned that no one likes me. In English, I learned that I'm disgusting. And in physics, I learned that I'm a loser.
Today in school, I learned that I'm ugly and useless. And in gym, I learned that I'm pathetic and a joke. In history, I learned that I'm trash.
Today in school, I learned that I have no friends. In English, I learned that I make people sick. And at lunch, I learned that I sit on my own because I smell. In chemistry, I learned that no one likes me.
In biology, I learned that I'm fat and stupid. And in math, I learned that I'm trash.
The only thing I didn't learn in school today?
The only thing I didn't learn today?
The only thing I didn't learn?
Is why no one ever helps.
Kids witness bullying every day. They want to help, but they don't know how. Teach them how to stop bullying and be more than a bystander at stopbullying.gov.
Here's an excerpt from Nailed by David Fitzgerald.
Didn't there have to have been a Jesus? Perhaps he was just a wandering teacher or an exorcist, an apocalyptic prophet or a zealot who opposed the Romans. Perhaps he was all these things, or even a composite of several such early first-century figures. But at any rate, surely there had to be somebody at the original core of Christianity, arguably the most famous individual in human history. All this seems to be a perfectly reasonable, completely natural assumption to make, so why would anyone be so foolish as to propose that Jesus never existed? Doesn't it just make more sense to assume that there was a historical Jesus, even if we're unable to recover the real facts about his life and death? As it turns out, no. The opposite is true. The closer we look at the evidence for Jesus, the less solid evidence we find, and the more we find suspicious silences and curious resemblances to the pagan and Jewish religious ideas and philosophies that preceded Christianity. And once you begin to parse out the origins of this tradition or that teaching from their various sources, the sweater begins unraveling quickly until it becomes very difficult to buy that there ever was, or even could have been, any historical figure at the center.
Nailed by David Fitzgerald is now available at atheistaudiobooks.com.
Welcome back to the Gaytheists Manifesto. We're taking a break from the Behind Enemy Lines topic for this segment to do an AMA Part 2. As I said before, we got a couple of questions that I thought were really good, and I didn't want to exclude them. So, first question comes from Steve. Steve says, I met a pre-op transgender lady about 17 years ago, and she had a boyfriend. Since she was still physically male, would the boyfriend be considered gay or straight? In other words, in your experience, do people who date transgender people date the sex or the gender? Or, of course, option 3, they date the person. So, the answer to that question is yes.
Yeah.
It's, romantic and sexual attraction is a far more complicated and fluid thing than a lot of people think that it is. A lot of people, I'll just talk about me personally. I really, really like guys. I really, really like girls. Not super sure how I feel about penis. Just throwing that out there. If that, just think about that for a second. So, it really depends. I mean, I have someone who's very dear to me, who we were, still are, very much in love with each other. Our relationship would never work for several reasons, but she knew me before I transitioned, and our connection was built before we transitioned, and it's the same now as it ever was. She never considered herself anything other than heterosexual before I transitioned. She sees me fully as a woman, but so that kind of made her ask some questions like, wow, so I fully accept her as a woman now, but I've never thought of myself as actually being attracted to women. So is my sexuality a little bit more complicated than I think it is? Or, did I meet this mythical one right person that's like, well, I like men except for this one girl because she's pretty hot and she's pretty awesome. And I think all of those experiences are valid. I think it's just a matter of the person and what their preferences and what their attractions are, some people are just attracted to the person and could care less about what's going on physically with, even outward attractiveness, to say nothing of secondary sex characteristics or their genitals. So, it just depends, really. That's kind of the best way to think about it.
I think it's probably also a lot more complicated when you're dating someone who transitions while you're dating. And there's never an either or. There's not an either or answer to that. If a gay man is dating who he thought was another gay man, but it turned out that this person was a trans woman who figured it out and transitioned, does that mean that he's still attracted to her? Well, that depends on the person. Some couples do survive a transition like that. Some couples don't. So it really just depends on the dynamic of that situation.
Well, right. And it can cause identity issues. I mean, someone who has built their identity around being a gay person, which is definitely a thing that you can do. I mean, if you're an activist, obviously your sexual orientation isn't all of you, but if you've had to fight so hard to be able to do that and to live as that person, it becomes very much a part of your identity. So, to have that thrown into question, like, wow, I've actually been in a relationship with a person who's not a man. and I'm still attracted to that person and I still love that person. So am I really gay? And those are tough questions to tackle. I mean, those aren't questions that I say that, that I can say I have an easy answer for. I think the best thing that I can say is that I think for the most part, everyone's sexuality is probably a little bit more complicated than they think it is. It's just not something that many people have actually had to tackle in their lives. If you're a guy who, especially if you're a cis guy who has only ever been in relationships with cis women and who's been happy with that, even if your sexuality is a little bit fluid, if you're happy with women, then it's not something that you really ever have to confront or think about. So yeah, it's a super, super complicated situation is really the best way that I can put it.
And also, this is a very, very small thing, but, and Steve said it in option 3, do they date the person? The person is the combination of the two things that were before that, the gender and the sex. Gender and sex make up the person. They don't exist outside of each other, I guess is what I'm trying to say. So just wanted to kind of throw that in there.
Right. I think maybe what he was alluding to are like pansexual people who, like, for people for whom gender and sex just absolutely make no difference, and their attraction is based on other things like, the person's personality or, their likes and dislikes and that kind of thing.
Right.
Which makes sense. But obviously how someone identifies in, as their gender, and even sex, because all of those things intersect to form your personality. So you're right, they definitely don't exist independently.
Yeah. Fair enough, that makes sense.
So Chris asked, I was wondering if when you began your transition, did your sexuality change at all? And the answer to that question is I'm not honestly sure. So
that's a really interesting question, though. I'd never thought of that.
Right. So to make a really, really long story shorter, I had never thought of myself as being attracted to anything other than women. Whether or not I was attracted to trans people never factored in, because I made such a good barrier around that entire topic in my mind that it never really came up. So I thought I had honestly examined the question, like, am I attracted to dudes? I don't know. Let's go look at some dudes that everyone thinks are hot. And I did, and I'm like, not doing anything for me. Not a big deal. And I never felt any sort of like internalized homophobia or anything like that. Like, I was never like, ooh, gay people are gross, gay sex is gross. Like, it was never anything like that. It was just like, this is not interesting to me sexually or romantically. But when I came out and I started transitioning and everything, I don't know if it's the hormones. I don't know if it was just repressed even deeper than my gender identity and it took me longer to confront. I don't really know. But I was watching the movie The Giver that was based on the book, which is one of my favorite books of all time. And Alexander Skarsgård walked onto the screen and I said, oh my God, he's gorgeous. And then I thought to myself, that's new.
Gorgeous like in a sexual way or just...
Oh, yeah.
Okay.
Oh, yeah.
I was going to say, I find women gorgeous all the time. I just don't want to have sex with them.
Right. And this was definitely like I want things to happen between you and I kind of thing.
Sexy time.
Right. So I was like, wow, that's a new feeling for me. And I found it happening more and more often. Like, I would see a guy and I would think like, wow, like I'm like attracted to that person. Not just like, wow, he's a handsome fella. Like, I can appreciate the aesthetics of, the way that he looks, but like a sexual and kind of romantic attraction. I mean, and I felt romantic attractions to guys.
The technical term for that is you wanted to make a sexy time with him.
Right. Well, put that down in the glossary of Gaytheist terms to know. So, that being said, for the longest time, I considered myself bi. And I introduced myself on this podcast as a bisexual person. And I've said it all the time. But frankly, I don't know anymore. Because without going into super crazy details, I had a quasi-sexual experience with a guy. And I felt pretty ambiguous about it.
Yeah.
And I don't know if it was the guy. I don't know if it was the circumstances in which it happened. I don't know if it's like, because it was a very new feeling, and I was just thinking to myself, like, there are gay people who have relationships with, gay men who have relationships with women and vice versa, as a way to repress their sexuality or because they think that's what they're supposed to do or whatever. So I was just thinking to myself, like, well, is this what that feels like? When you're doing this, even though it's not what you want and it's not what you like, is that what this feeling is?
Yeah.
So, like, am I maybe not attracted to guys in the way that I thought? Like, is this all, did it all sound really good in theory? And then once it kind of happened, I was less interested in it. And that's something that's still up in the air. So I've gone back to just calling myself queer because I don't know.
Yeah, and that also points to sort of a problem we have with our current paradigm of labeling sexuality. Is it just really, the words that we have really don't express the spectrum that's possible with sexuality.
Well, and there's the idea that once somebody says they're a thing and they change it, then it's like, well, you just don't know what the hell you want. And not understanding that, if you're a person who hasn't been exploring these things your entire life, one, they can be fluid. I mean, they can change. I know people who've said 100% before that they were gay, and now that they're they just all of a sudden, like, wow, you know what? I'm not attracted to the same gender, the same sex anymore. Mm-hmm. And it wasn't like, being gay is bad. It was just like, wow, my attractions kind of changed, and that's okay. And some people can, well, I think I'm this thing, so I'm gonna say that I'm this thing, and then they have an experience that demonstrates that it may be something different. Well, maybe I'm this thing instead. Like, that's all okay. Yeah. We're all just kind of trying to figure ourselves out here, and there's nothing wrong with that.
I agree. And for the folks who do say you just don't know what you want, it's one thing to, when you have your entire life, when your sexuality just happens to be what's accepted the most in mainstream culture, you've had your entire life to figure it out and to explore that and to test it out. When you're a sexual minority, it's more complicated, and sometimes you can spend your entire life or half your life not really exploring what you want. So
yeah, so once you've sort of shed that and said, like, okay, I can actually explore the way that I honestly feel about this now. Mm-hmm. There can be lots and lots of shifting around in that, while you figure out who you are, or like I said, you might find out that it's fluid.
Yeah.
And that's all okay.
I think it's okay to not know what you want. That's part of life,
Exactly. So in the last question here is from Ashley. Being a transgender woman and an atheist leaves me in a very small group. I would like to find a partner. I am attracted to any gender. What can you suggest for finding a person who is a member of that small pool of people that are attracted to non-gender conforming and non-religious thinking individuals? And I'm going to have to disappoint and say that is something that I struggle with as well, frankly. Mm-hmm. And it's not something that I've found a really good answer for. To get super personal, a lack of intimacy is something that I struggle very, very hard with. And I don't just mean sex. I just mean intimacy, like being able to cuddle, being able to hold hands, being able to, run my hand through somebody's hair and, and just hold somebody. Like, that's stuff I crave that, and I don't get it very often at all. So, that's, if I had to pick my number one struggle, it would be between body issues and that, at this point in my life. Yeah. So, not to be depressing, but I don't have a super solid answer for that. All I can say, I know OkCupid has, options where you can identify yourself as a trans person. So, you can kind of weed out people who aren't interested. It's really interesting. I did an experiment once where I set my OkCupid profile. I didn't mention anything about being trans in the description of my profile, and I just put woman for my gender. And my God, you should have seen my inbox.
Yeah.
And it was the stereotypical stuff you think when you think about being a woman on the internet.
Just a bunch of disgusting, sexually charged, unwelcome advances.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And so I set my profile back to saying that I was trans. And it's like the first 2 sentences in the profile is like, look, I'm trans. If you're not cool with that, you probably just want to move on. And the messages stopped immediately.
Yeah.
And now the ones that I get are either still that, I just get fewer of them, or I get people who think I'm a fetish object. I get the occasional, very polite message from someone who lives on the other side of the damn world.
Yes.
So that's a thing, which is nice, but like, and I'm always up for new friends, but like, I'm on OkCupid because I want to find somebody to be in a relationship with.
Right.
So, I know there are trans-specific dating websites. I can't think of what they are off the top of my head. I'm a terrible person and probably should have done more prep for this. I think one of them is just transdate.com or transgenderdate.com. I would Google that before actually putting in the URL in case that's a really bad site that you don't want to go to. But yeah, like I said, I wish I had a better answer, but if I can tell you anything, it's that you're not alone. And that's something that I struggle with pretty hard too.
Yeah, and folks might be surprised to hear this, but transphobia is not just something that exists in the straight world. Transphobia is alive and well in the gay world as well. So I feel like, it'd be one thing, it'd still be terrible, but if a trans woman who was looking for a guy was really the only problem, that would be bad. But I think trans people have it coming whether they're gay or straight. And
oh yeah,
is what I'm trying to say, and kind of bumbling over my words a bit. But yeah, it's just that it exists. It exists, and I can't even say that it's not as bad in the gay world.
Well, and especially for gender non-conforming people who are non-binary identified.
Yeah.
Because I fit a little bit more inside of the box that a person can see. So like, okay, you identify as a woman, so like that's a known quantity for me. But for someone who says I'm genderqueer or agender or bigender or any one of those many identities on that spectrum, it's even tougher for folks like them because, for someone who isn't super socially conscious and aware and knows these things, like they don't even know what those words mean.
Yeah.
So they're like, ooh, well, there's no way I'm going to get near that person.
Yeah.
And I mean, that's just, it's just awful. I hate that so much.
Yeah, it sucks. And I think, it seems to me that, obviously dating's not easy for any group. It's not easy for any group.
Right.
And that said, I think that, when you have like a person like me, a cisgender gay guy, I typically when I was looking for guys to date, I sort of had a specific idea of the ideal mate. I think it can be really difficult for someone who's non-gender conforming or who is trans, or is otherwise, some shade of the rainbow that is more rare. They're going to have a really hard time finding people because people don't even know that they're looking for them, and they don't really have a framework to judge them. So it's kind of like, well, a gay guy wants another gay guy, a gay woman wants another gay woman, a straight man wants a straight woman, and a straight woman wants a straight man. And then it seems like it'd be very difficult to find the exceptions to that. I know they exist.
Well, right. And even if you can get past one level to being, yeah, like I totally accept trans men as men and I totally accept trans women as women, like totally good with that. But genderqueer people don't know what's going on with that.
Yeah.
And I mean, I see those attitudes a lot. I mean, even as not being a genderqueer person, I mean, I see those things happening in the discourse, quote unquote, all the time. And
I don't want to say that it's like these people who are finding it hard to accept trans people or gender non-conforming people as romantic partners. I don't think that they're bad per se. And they're not.
No.
I think it's a cultural thing. I think it's the way that we as a culture sort of look at these people, and are we even looking at them? How visible are they really in society? And I think that as these folks become more and more visible, which really, I mean, that's the most important thing, is for people who don't fit in these established binaries, to become more and more visible. Then I think society will begin thinking of them more, and maybe, problems like Ashley's having will become less, maybe.
Yeah, let's hope so.
Yeah.
We're going to take one more quick break, and we will be back with Be a Better Ally. We're going to talk about how we can be better for folks who are trapped in these situations. More Gaytheist Manifesto coming up.
Here's an excerpt from Mum, Dad, I'm an Atheist by David G. McAfee.
It is the same highly regarded concept of an afterlife that allows misguided religious people to justify the mistreatment of those who disagree with their religious ideologies. They are simply trying to protect you from eternal damnation in the afterlife by condemning you, insulting you, and even disowning you in this life. It is not to say that becoming open about your disbelief is always going to be met with these negative reactions, and, in fact, that is precisely what this work is hoping to prevent. But it is important to understand that if you experience negative reactions from religious kin, it is probably a result from the religion's teachings, and likely not from any personal vendetta or hatred.
Mom, Dad, I'm an Atheist by David G. McAfee is now available at atheistaudiobooks.com. Here's an excerpt from Disproving Christianity by David G. McAfee.
Each argument and contradiction presented will bring us closer to disproving the main pillars of Christianity, using nothing more than logical thinking, statistics, scientific and historical data, and holy scriptures. The debates between Christians and non-Christians have raged for thousands of years, and I expect the conflict to continue. But I do hope that these arguments will allow those Christians who may not have questioned biblical fallibility in the past to realize that these texts are man-made, and they represent the ideas of those fallible individuals who created and edited the compilation of texts now considered to be the Holy Bible. They contain errors, contradictions, and a stagnant moral code which, in many ways, no longer coincides with the morality of modern man. What I hope to gain from presenting these arguments and little-known biblical passages to the reader is a sense of understanding of Scripture which may not be presented in Bible study or in church, and for good reason. If read with an open mind, I truly believe that this book will open people's eyes to the wonders of free thought in a way that other works utilizing a more philosophical approach cannot.
Disproving Christianity and Other Secular Writings by David G. McAfee is now available at atheistaudiobooks.com.
And welcome back to the Gaytheist Manifesto. This week's Be a Better Ally. We're going to talk about how to be a better ally to folks who are stuck in these environments, in these environments that are hostile to them, as you know, in their family environments and their work environments and that kind of thing. Daniel, what are your thoughts?
Well, I think that it's good, and this goes for really almost any situation. But if you can be someone who is a safe space, sort of a safe harbor for folks to come to and talk to, and just to let it be known that that you disagree with, if whether it's homophobia going on in the office or misogyny or what have you, just sort of reaching out and letting someone know that they're not alone goes a very long way, I think.
Yeah, I couldn't agree more. I'm trying to find the picture of the sign, but so Jeremiah from No Religion Required, who he and I are like best buds now. I love Jeremiah so much, So he posted this picture of his desk at work, and on the wall he has a picture that says, it's got the upside down triangle. Yeah, I can't find the picture, but it's got the upside down triangle, and it says, "This space is safe for all people, regardless of sexual orientation, gender identity, gender expression, religion, ability, socioeconomic status, so on and so forth." And he has it just like up in his cubicle at work, which I think is awesome.
That's badass. Good job.
Yeah. So I'm super, super stoked to know that that's a thing.
Yeah.
And you can do that in more subtle ways too. Like, if you're worried that your environment may actually be hostile to that, you can find safe ways to identify yourself as an ally to people. If, the world of, social justice and social consciousness, if that's something that there's a certain vocabulary that people like us use, and a certain language that we use when we're talking about those kind of things. Like, you can pretty much, if someone knows what the word cisgender means, they're probably either a trans ally or a shit-tastic RMA who thinks the word cisgender is an insult. So you can at least narrow it down. Yep. So, just different things like that. And, just finding safe and subtle ways to say hey, I'm a person who gets it, and this is okay with me. That's what I think. I have a feeling, even though she didn't say so, my coworker who asked me what I thought about the quote Bruce Jenner situation, I have a feeling that she was trying to goad me into talking about, whether I was trans or not, or being trans.
That sounds about right, honestly.
But the whole point was, she was just when I started talking about my transition and stuff, and she's like, I just saw your face light up, you seem so happy about this. And I was like, I am. And she was like, well, if you're happy, that's the important thing. Yeah. And I was like, why can't other people freaking get that?
Yeah, I think they can. I think most people can. It just takes some folks' journey to that is a lot more mired and convoluted. So.
Yeah, and then the other thing too, I think, and we've said this on a few other segments, on a few other ally segments, is if you see something, say something.
Yes.
You don't have to think that there's a gay or a trans person around to hear it, to speak up and say hey, that's not cool. I actually felt really bad at work the other day. I heard a guy bragging about how he hacked into someone else's Facebook and made a 3 paragraphs long message, coming out as gay for this guy. And he just thought that was hilarious. And I caught the tail end of it right as I was about to clock back in from break, and I wasn't about to be like, hey dude, that's not cool. I guess I could have said something to HR if I wanted to, but that in that case, even if HR didn't identify me, I have a feeling that everyone would know it was me.
Yeah.
If you know what I mean. So that was kind of a tough spot to be in, but if you feel safe doing so, don't wait until you think there are gay or trans people around to hear that kind of thing before you say that it's not cool, and before you say because even if you don't change that person's mind, and people say that they would rather people be outward about their racism so that they know who the bigots are. To be honest, I'm not sure I agree with that. Because if you're a hardcore racist, I'm not sure that there's anything I'm going to do to be able to change your mind. What I would rather you do is just keep that to yourself.
That's fair.
You know what I mean? I don't want you to feel comfortable expressing racist views or homophobic views or transphobic views. If you're going to have them, it's whatever. I'm obviously going to try and change your mind if I think that's a thing that I can do, but I want to make the environment very, very uncomfortable for people who want to express those ideas. Yeah. And to even just get when somebody says a joke oh, I don't get it, why is that funny? You know what I mean? I want bigots to feel uncomfortable because I'm tired of feeling uncomfortable myself, and I'm tired of other people telling me how uncomfortable they feel at work or in social situations because of it. So let's make bigots feel uncomfortable in those situations. I'm 100% in favor of that.
Yeah, and when you were talking earlier about not waiting for there to be a gay or a trans person in the room before you speak up. Speak up if for no other reason than because you don't want to live in a world where it's okay for folks to tell jokes that demean disenfranchised groups.
Yeah, I couldn't agree more. And, I guess there's not really a ton more to say on this one. Just, find safe and subtle ways to identify yourself as an ally. Obviously your work environment, your family environment, it's going to determine how you do that.
Yeah.
And don't be I'll say don't be afraid to speak up. Obviously, if you have a legit reason to be afraid to speak up, don't compromise your safety or anything like that.
Yeah, it's not appropriate for every situation to be a loudmouth.
Right. If you feel like you can, definitely stick up.
Yeah, but definitely reach out to people. If you see someone, or if you perceive them as someone who is being mistreated because of their race or their sexuality or their gender or anything, reach out. You don't have to be crazy social justice warrior about it, but reach out to people, let them know that they have a friend who is a safe space, and I think you can really make a big difference in someone's life doing that.
Yeah, I actually have a friend who I'm fully out to at work, and I don't know if I told this story on an episode or not, but I was helping somebody in our group chat because they didn't have access to a tool that I did. So I was on a call myself and helping this person with their call because I had access to this tool. And when I was done, I said, "Hey, you're all set." And he put in group chat, he said, "Thank you, sir." And I just corrected him and said, "Ma'am," because this person works in a different location than I'm at. So it uses my full name in group chat, Calliope. And I'm like, I don't know if you've ever met a dude named Calliope. But whatever, maybe it was an innocent mistake. Yeah. But when it happened, this friend actually sent me an instant message and said, "I saw that. Are you okay? I'm really sorry about that."
Yeah, cool stuff like that. It doesn't take a lot.
Yeah. So, and I mean, that meant a lot to me, and that kind of blunted the sting a little bit. And like I said, I don't know, because I know people gossip about me at work. I've been informed of that. And I know people in that location where he was gossip about me. So it's probably likely he knows that I'm a trans person. But I don't know if the misgendering was deliberate or not. And I'm not going to make an assumption one way or the other.
The important thing is that someone reached out to you and
exactly
kind of assuaged it a little bit.
Exactly. Well, that, my friends, is going to do it for this episode of the Gaytheist Manifesto on Secular Media Network. I want to say thank you to my co-host, Daniel.
My pleasure.
And I also want to thank our guest, Nat. Thank you so much for sharing your story and experience with us. You can find the show on Facebook at facebook.com/The Gaytheist Manifesto. You can email us at thegaytheistmanifesto@gmail.com. I'm on Twitter at GaytheistCallie.
And I'm on Twitter at Daniel Wolfsong.
And you can find the show on Twitter at The Gaytheists. To support the show, please leave us a 5-star rating on iTunes. That would be sweet. Or go to patreon.com/The Gaytheist Manifesto if you want to support the show financially. Before we go, I want you to know that if you're lost, you're hurting, you're scared, if you feel like no one cares and no one understands, you need to know there's a community out here that loves you, cares for you, and knows that you're capable of amazing things and that you are worthy of love. If you're struggling, please don't be afraid to reach out. Until next time, friends, this is the Gaytheist Manifesto.